research, of presentations on our theme of driving forward on the road to recovery. So driving forward on the road to recovery in the essence of our COVID-19 pandemic is important to us. And I think that I would like to introduce firstly our president, the founder of CAMED Business School, Casey Barnett, to speak to us and provide an introduction. So Casey, could I pass the floor to you?
Thank you. Patricia Valdenebro, CEO of the TCI Network, Marit Daniel Nielsen, President of TCI Network, Professor Ken Jarman, Chairman of the MOC Asian Chapter and Chairman of the CAMED Business School Research Committee. Distinguished presenters, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome you to the TCI MOC Asia Conference 2021. Thanks to the guidance and leadership of our Professor Ken Jarman, CAMED Business School was accepted as an affiliate of the Harvard Microeconomics of Competitiveness Network in 2018. CAMED Business School is the only internationally accredited institute of higher education in Cambodia. We were established with the aim of facilitating economic development here in Cambodia, and we recognize the potential for the cluster approach to support sustained development and development of competitive advantage in Cambodia and the ASEAN region. To realize this potential, the potential of the cluster approach, it is essential for us to collect, analyze, and share real-world data in our respective countries and regions. This TCI MOC Asia Conference is a powerful way for us to further our understanding of clusters and disseminating knowledge of clusters to a broader audience. This conference is blessed with highly distinguished speakers, and it is our pleasure to hear from them. On behalf of CAMED Business School in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, welcome. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Casey, and welcome to everybody. And may I start the ball rolling by passing to my colleague, Patricia Valdenebro, who will be hosting and the event for today. So Patricia, we're looking forward very much to our events both today and tomorrow, remember, for everyone. And so can I pass the floor to you? And it is with great pleasure. Patricia, the floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much for bringing us together in this conference, for taking the lead to organize and hosting us today. Thank you very much, Casey Barnett, for your welcome. It's great to be together in this still difficult year, and it's the second one. But it's great that we have a place to convene, to talk together, to discuss ideas around collaboration and the challenges ahead for clusters and companies in Asia. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this first day of the 2021 TCI MOC Asia Conference on driving forward on the road to recovery. Our hosts from CAMED Business School are taking the baton after the National University of Mongolia, who hosted us in 2020. And today we are going to try to bring the best of the TCI and the MOC networks, Asian chapters, to discuss around the green, social, and digital challenges and how they are being addressed through collaboration in Asia. The conference has a two-day program. Today is the first day, where we want to focus more on the practice of collaboration and clustering in Asia. And tomorrow we will have our MOC Day with faculty members, and where they will share the latest research and academic cases. So how are we going to organize today, this first day? First, we will show some of our global perspectives in TCI on how collaboration and clusters are helping to drive forward in the road to recovery, with keynotes from our president, the TCI president, Merete Daniel Nielsen, and from Christian Kettels, who chairs our board of advisors in TCI. And I will bring you also some insights on how we are helping the members of the TCI network to upgrade their collaborative strategies through our activities. And then we will explore new forms of collaboration in Asia with 2 cases from Taiwan and Kazakhstan. And we will see some cluster videos from Mongolia and Japan to see how is real life in clusters in those two or 4 places. And finally, we will have an open discussion that we invite you all to be part of also with all the members of the TCI and MOC chapters, and see what synergies can we find and what next activities we can push together. So we have 3 hours to go through all this. And for your info, we are recording the sessions and we plan to later disseminate all the material among the registrants, but also among the members of the chapters. Okay. Let me introduce our president, Merete Daniel Nielsen. Merete is represents also a Danish organization called Cluster Excellence Denmark, where they have been working for many years together with the ministries in Denmark and all the cluster landscape that they support in moving forward, in bringing more excellence to the cluster management, in having more internationalized clusters. And with that inputs and the inputs from the global TCI network, she's going to introduce us on the topic for today. Merete, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And also from my side, a big warm welcome to this TCI Network MOC Conference 2021. Thank you for great co-organizing from Ken Jarman, and thank you for your support at the Camden Business School. This is great that we can co-host and co-organize. It really brings, new ideas to the table and new perspectives on how to move forward. I represent a global network of practitioners. It's needless to say that this cross-fertilization between the academic world and the practical world is really very useful and very insightful for us when we want to move the cluster agenda forward. I've been president for 2.5 years. Needless to say that most of this time, of course, been during the pandemic. I would love to be in Cambodia today, unfortunately not. But with the online formats, we're able to bring in more global attendance. So great to see the numbers in the chat, and also I know people are listening online in hybrid formats. So welcome to all of you. I just want to underline what Patricia said, that please be active during the whole 3 hours we have ahead of us today. Share your ideas, perspectives, challenges in the chat. We're very eager from TCI Network to develop more cluster-based work in Asia, and we're very eager to see how we can understand this more and how we can contribute to that going forward. So welcome to all, and let me start my sharing my presentation. So like Patricia said, it's indeed been a journey over the last years. I hope everything is fine now. You can see my presentation. And it's been a journey of understanding the power of collaboration and what are the trends, what are pushing this transition forward, what are the new topics, what are our members, our TCI members across the world talking about on this road. And it is quite clear that there are some common areas, despite that we were different. We come from different areas, we have different circumstances in trying to tackle this crisis, but there are also common areas and common knowledge that we can share and hopefully bring to inspire all of you in your work going forward. So clusters is a global thing. We see them all over. We also see more and more supporting organizations around the world. We call these cluster organizations, cluster initiatives. Some of these organizations are very business driven, come from a business perspective, but others are perhaps driven more like with public authorities or from research side. In many cases, they might not use the cluster word in their title. Some use the words a hub or a platform, a network or partnership. Normally, quite many of these kind of cluster organizations, even though they're not called cluster organizations, they can still be seen having this kind of collaborative mindset. It's an area we see mushrooming a lot. It's really developing a lot. Many stakeholders taking on this kind of perspectives. Currently, we assess that we alone in Europe have around 2,500 of these kind of cluster organizations. And a very loose estimation is around the world around 7,000. We don't have specific data on that, but yeah, bringing together all the knowledge we have in TCI, we estimate with those numbers. So why is this happening? Why is this area developing so much, perhaps even stronger coming out of the pandemic? It's because we can see that many of the challenges of tomorrow, they really demand a new way of collaborating, and it also requires new business models to meet those challenges. We can see in general that many of the challenges, they really go beyond what any single company or municipality or organization or university can solve on their own. And here the cooperation element is really key. And we can see whatever we call them, networks, partnerships, cluster organizations, they are a future way of collaborating. We have a bunch of analysis on this. We have a lot of impact assessments now, and we can basically see that companies in clusters, they are more innovative, they are more productive, they export more, they are more international. There's a lot of material on that, and if you want to have more, reach out to me, and we're happy to share this. And it's basically about that we need neutral platform for collaboration. We need a place to where we can share all our challenges. And we also need to understand what is coming tomorrow. We know today, but we also know the unknown. We know that we need to address what comes tomorrow. And here clusters really makes a difference. We can see that stakeholders joining clusters are becoming more and more complex. Many clusters built on a classical triple helix structure, the classical structure of companies, public institutions, and knowledge institutions. As the clusters grow and become more familiar in the system, then more stakeholders will join in, will say, okay, here's a platform that could utilize. We can see now today that more stakeholders like investors are joining, especially during the pandemic. More investors have joined clusters because they wanted to invest in new solutions. We can see more startups are joining the cluster initiatives, and also NGOs wanting to make a difference, but also wanting to have a business angle. So basically, a lot of the ecosystem behind these cluster organizations are becoming more and more complex. And that's good, because then these cluster initiatives cover a broad range of stakeholders, but it also means then that more and more tasks are being undertaken in these kind of institutions. We can see there's a big difference in the kind of cluster organizations we have. A younger, smaller one is around 25 stakeholders, but we also do see very, very large cluster organizations with more than 500 stakeholders. And I think last year we set the record with Green Cape in South Africa with almost 2,000 stakeholders. So we do have some very, very big cluster organizations around. What they do, the cluster organizations, are quite different. It of course depends solely on the sector they come from, the challenges faced by that sector. Going back a bit, in many cases, cluster organizations were started with the aim of business development or driving forward some kind of innovation project or competence development, and basically also being this matchmaking platform between companies and knowledge institutions. Then as the cluster organizations grow bigger, become more consolidated, more and more tasks, more and more is expected from the organizations. And now we see they move into areas also like branding, showing visibility. We are here, want to show our region, what we can do. So they set a bunch of brand activities in place. Like I mentioned, more and more clusters are also working with entrepreneurship, host incubators, support entrepreneurs in different ways, with mentors and things like that. We can also see more clusters moving into internationalization, also a topic that many of our members in TCI are quite occupied with. What is then the role of the cluster organization in taking on more and more international activities? But with the topic of today on transformation or recovery, we also see quite many of the funding schemes being put in place to really push forward some kind of recovery. Here, the existing cluster organizations play a big role in pushing forward circular economy, pushing forward digitalization. So basically being used as machines for transformation. So this is one of the big trends, some of the new things we're seeing a huge push in. So clusters perhaps being in one sector, now moving into other sectors because they basically are quite good in transforming all the governmental aid or the business, the different programs being put in place to work on the challenges that we're facing as we come out of the pandemic. So I want to share some of the trends and some of the challenges we see in TCI network and how different cluster organizations have tackled this and put in place a range of different activities to tackle the challenges. And of course, this pandemic has really been a push for digital transformation. It's been a core for many SMEs to tackle the pandemic. And it's not easy. We do also have a case, I know from Taiwan, that really many SMEs, they can see the need, but they will also need a lot of support going forward. One area that's been, of course, a lot hit, really hit during the pandemic is the tourism sector. And some of the tourism clusters we have in TCI, they have put in place different kind of activities to both thinking about how can we restart tourism and how can we use that process of integrating digital transformation as a way to both rethink and restart the tourism sector. And quite many of them have put in place different kind of travel track initiatives to restart tourism in a safer way. So tech travel, I didn't know much about it, but it is a lot about offering different kind of projects and services to make travel safer. So booking services, how can you put in place different platforms where it's much easier to find the information yourself? How can you perhaps create a digital experience? Of course, it's nicer to go to see a volcano in Iceland on your own, but actually how can you put in place a digital experience where you are almost experiences the volcano outburst they have right now. And also how can you manage to reach new customers and also local customers, because this has been a way of still keeping at least some tourism in place. Also tech travel is a challenge for many SMEs. There are quite many global strong players in place. I guess many of you know Momondo or Booking.com. So there are big, strong digital players where an SME need to adapt their business model and find their own way of tackling that. Here, the cluster organization has been a way of addressing the challenges. How can we integrate more tech travel? How can we also integrate other trends? I think many have really used this opportunity to really rethink topics around sustainability, because so many areas, the popular areas have been very crowded and it's not been good for those places. So what does it mean? Does it matter? How can we rethink and integrate more sustainability in our next version or next generation of tourism? A nice quote I got from CESA, the South African Tourism Network, is the collaboration is really the new currency. They actually measured in numbers how specific they actually were able to help the companies in raising their income when they joined the cluster and when they collaborated together. But you can study more. There are some nice case examples, and they've done a bunch of things. This is just showing you some of the highlights. Another major trend that many cluster initiatives are tackling right now is the topic of green transition and circular economy. And I think many governments, regions now want to build in a green recovery. So it's not going back to the black economy, but we need to think about still reducing our CO2 emission and putting in place more circular economy principles. Also in TCI network, we spent quite a while on this topic. During the last year, we had one very nice example coming across from the Green Tech Ruhr. This was initiated by a business metropole Ruhr, that is basically Europe's second largest metropolitan area, so quite many inhabitants. They have a history of coal and steel and really producing a lot of CO2 emission and having a lot of climate challenges. And since 5 years, they now gathered more than 200 members coming from different sectors, companies, research institutions, education institutions. And they've been so great at it that they even won a prize last year on how can we really help SMEs to promote green markets and develop them, because that's also a challenge that many SMEs have. They can see that there is a potential in this area, but they really don't understand how to redefine their own business model and how to move into that area. Here in this case, the cluster organization really played a role in matchmaking and in facilitating meetings. They also did an online matchmaking platform for companies. They tried to help the companies to get access to more knowledge, offer them trainings, because some of the workforce is not having the necessary skills. So really putting in place courses on how to develop a green mindset, how to redefine the business processes in the company. And together with my organization, Cluster Excellence Denmark, TCI Network, we did a joint booklet on how to move forward to a new greener normal. So we did a survey. There's a lot of information there as well. And there's some more case studies for you to dive into, with also a case actually from Russia, but several European cases on how cluster organizations have helped to tackle the different challenges in their sectors. Another challenge that's been very clear during the pandemic is this notion of how do we keep in place a more cohesive, inclusive society? How can we tackle the societal challenges? The recovery can be about, just making the strong ones win, but really making everything more inclusive and bringing more players to the table. And we see that story for quite many different places around the world. One case we heard from during our global conference last year in TCI is a very nice example from Mexico, the automotive cluster Nuevo León, where one of our world's leading steel companies, here the Mexican CEO is president from the board, and for him this closeness to the local community and helping the local community is really essential. So when the pandemic hit last year, they did a range of different things and wanted basically to build a hospital to help to respond to the pandemic. But they put in place a range of different activities to really make sure that they very closely could collaborate with the local community to ensure more sustainable growth. So they work in topics on education, on culture, sports. They have put in place a library and put in place a bunch of different social activities. And this cluster really see they have a leading role in adapting to both a more digital, a more sustainable, and also thinking about more inclusive business model. So one of the final things we saw a lot is, of course, all of this virtual collaboration. How can companies, how can public stakeholders put in place new virtual services so we can keep on collaborating, sharing, and meeting each other in new formats. It was a huge pleasure that TCI got a new member from Emilia-Romagna in Italy. So 14 days ago, we organized a second global cluster matchmaking We had around 300 cluster-like participants. They met for networking and collaboration. So this is an online platform. You put in a profile, and then the system organizes meetings where you can meet the people you want to meet with. I also saw quite many joining from Asia, so that was very nice. But actually we had all 6 continents represented. We had 55 companies. There was around 250 meetings. We are now assessing what was the outcome of those meetings. Did this lead to new business collaboration, or what kind of outcome was there? We can see quite many are still using the profile. So there's a lot of, checking who are the other ones. Is there potential for further collaboration? So I think it's a good current mapping of what is happening, and also a way of networking across the world. So we hope to continue this online matchmaking. So pay attention for next year, around summertime. Hopefully we will be able to repeat this event again. In TCI network, we also undertook several initiatives to understand how can we early on, and we did this recovery playbook together last year with Christian Ketels, that is also a keynote later on. So this is still online, both offering a structured approach on how can we adapt to the different phases of the pandemic, but also encouraging everybody to think about what comes tomorrow. How can we better prepare our own organizations for the new challenges? Again, there's some cases. They are, of course, a lot about the pandemic in the early phases, but we could see already last year during the spring that quite many were putting in place new strategies, new ambitions on how to move forward. And this is just a sneak peek that I want to end with. New cluster policy roadmap that we are launching very soon. So this is, I don't want to show the whole thing, but we're putting in place 6 phases to some of the challenges we can see that quite many are struggling when they put in place a cluster policy for perhaps the first time, or where they're trying to update their program. So we will come back to you with that, and hope you can use it in also going ahead with a cluster-based approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merete. This is very nice introduction to all the topics that we have for the day. To participants, please make use of the chat whenever you have questions. We plan to open some time for interaction with the audience after Christian's presentation in a while, but please at any time make use of it to make questions, but also comments, analysis, whatever you feel like to share with us, either in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will try to intercalate, okay? Let's continue then with the program, and now we want also to hear from you. I'm going to launch a poll and invite you to share your views on which of the following topics you think is more important to your work at the moment, to your cluster work at the moment. Is it green transition, or is it digital transformation? Is it social economic recovery? And it's a multiple choice. You can choose more than one, probably on working on more than one thing. But we want to know more or less what is the most important thing that is guiding your day-to-day work in these days. I'm going to leave it open, the poll, and meanwhile I want to share with you, because I know that many of you are newcomers to the TCI network, and so I want to introduce you a little bit about our organization and the kind of activities that we do for our members. Let me share my screen in another presentation. Sorry. Now, there we go. This is a picture of the last time we could convene in person, face-to-face in Antwerp in our global conference in 2019. And we hope to go back to face-to-face soon, very soon in September, in our next global conference in Kazan in Russia. Yeah, it's meanwhile it has all going virtual, but we are very much looking forward to be together again and together with all our global network of practitioners. And TCI is the place where experts in clusters and innovation ecosystem interact, learn, and get inspired. We have been doing this for more than 20 years, supporting cluster practitioners, exchanging experiences, benchmarking cluster initiatives, and cluster programs, cluster strategies. We try to also to identify what are the key features of successful policies and cluster programs, collaboration programs. And we have the best expertise within the network at the global level. And we have tried to have also very active participation in joint projects and joint activities among the members of the network. In these 20 years, more than 6,000 practitioners have been participating in one of our conferences or activities, and we think we have provided them with part of their professional development. So we are very proud of what we have achieved in these 20 years, and to see that the network is still expanding with more members, with more activities at global levels, with more chapters. This is the values, the vision that guide us, our mission, what we do, but I want to focus more on the strategic areas. Here you have Merete, and you can see the video where she's presenting our new strategy 2022-2025. And one area is the global connections. This is where we are really strong, and we can provide more to our members, provide them access to peers and experts around the globe to enrich cluster networks and to provide collaboration opportunity with like-minded partners. We also give inspiration around clusters. We try to inspire new models of high-performing clusters by improving competences and capabilities of the clusters, of the people that work in these clusters. And we are very strong in policy learning. We tried also to speed up learning, to update and upgrade policies, strategies, and programs for inclusive development with a cluster or collaborative approach. We asked our members at the beginning of the year what were the most relevant elements in their cluster strategy and programs. And they told us that digital, green, and social aspects were very important for them. And on the right side, you can see here the more transversal things that clusters usually work on, and that are still very important for most of the cluster practitioners. Skills, all having to do with upskilling and reskilling through clusters, internationalization, all the new shapes of internationalization that is happening now, and the virtual collaboration, all the topics that Merete has been approaching in her presentations. And as I say, the conference in Kazan, where I encourage you to participate, we are going to gather face-to-face, but there is also the possibility to join online. We are working on a hybrid program where participants can not only learn, but also interact and network with the global network of TCI. Let me change here to the specific activities that we have been doing in 2021 to give you a more concrete sense of the kind of topics that we are doing. We have some global webinars. At the moment, this year, we have had 2 so far. There is a lot of material in our YouTube channel that you can go through and take a look to past conferences, to past webinars that are really insightful. In this case, we went through how to set up and implement a right cluster program, so more on strategies for countries and for territories, with 2 cases from Iceland and Hungary. And from there, we also continue in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance in Hungary to have a peer review with experts from the network to explore their plans for the next strategy of clusters that they are planning in Hungary, how we can bring new ideas or more recommendations at global level to this new strategy. On the right side, you have the 2 ladies with whom we discuss about how to continue upgrading cluster excellence. We see that many clusters are looking for new ways, new business models, new ways of funding, trying to adapt their strategies also with all those new aspects that we have been discussing so far. And we also had a presentation of a very useful tool by Christian Rangen and Victor Hasse on a report on cluster business models that they have recapitulate from different places of the world. We also launched a TCI Green Lab. All the green transition is, as you could see, very urgent in most of the places. And we wanted to have a space where we can think together and explore, as Merete was saying, what are the challenges for clusters in this, how we can support them to take most of the opportunities, if it is a matter of giving them more access to new opportunities arising, if they are really prepared in terms of their teams to tackle these new opportunities. Also to see if it is more a market thing that they have to work on and see what are the options for clusters, and work on a specific value proposition on that. And this is ongoing, so you are welcome also to join if you want to join at any time. It's open to members, and we are very welcome to bring in new cases and to explore new things. The Cluster Evaluation Working Group, who has been working for a very long time in TCI, how to monitor the cluster work, is one of the things that we know we have to put more effort on. And this year we had a session on how the clusters are capturing against COVID contribution, with very nice examples from different regions, and on how they are evidencing the contribution of clusters in the response to pandemic. The global matchmaking, as Merete said, is some other thing that it was really very interesting to see specific collaboration opportunities between clusters, cluster to cluster, and also cluster to business. So we are very happy to have been participating in this matchmaking event. And the regional chapters, that's something that I will go later on this, as we are going to have a specific session at the end of today on this, on the Asian chapter, but they are regional initiatives that serve the specific needs in the region of cluster practitioners. At the moment, we have 3, one in Latin America, in Asia and Oceania. And this year we plan to launch 2 new ones in Africa and in North America. And I stop here, and let's take a look to the chat. And to the voting. And it seems that for you participants today, digital transformation is by far the most important topic that you are working on the moment. And we are very glad that some of the presentation that we have led today will tackle on this specifically. The case of Taiwan will go in this direction. Thank you very much all for participating. And I give the floor to our next speaker, who is Christian Kettels. Hello, Christian. So nice to see you here.
Good morning,
Christian
Patricia.
Good morning. He's at the moment the chair of our board of advisors, but he has been also president of TCI. I'm particularly happy, Christian, that you are today with us because we started this TCI Asia chapter when you were president and you were bringing together the Asian practitioners and also the MOC network. So very, very happy to have you here. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And it's a real pleasure to be here this morning. First of all, of course, I'm delighted to have a chance to engage with both the TCI and the MOC communities in Asia. It's great to see how these two networks that I've been fortunate enough to work with are collaborating in this way. And I think it's a real great opportunity to bring together practitioners, as Maretta said, which is kind of have their home in the TCI network, and the MOC network, which is academics that have an interest in application of their theories and do their research. So really kudos to this collaboration. Also fantastic, I think, both from you, Patricia, and from Maretta earlier to see all the good things that are happening within the TCI network. I do think, while there are a lot of negatives with this pandemic, there are also some opportunities to really tap into these global digital tools some more. And in some ways, while we are in our real life circle, have been constrained much more during the last year and a half. In many ways, I think we also are more eager to go out and learn and work with others and kind of engage globally. And I think TCI is one of the ways that we can do this. So thank you very much for the invitation to share a few thoughts here with the audience today. And of course, also thanks a lot for Ken and his colleagues at Camet Business School for hosting. Let me share my screen. So I hope this is visible.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we need to think about this next phase of our competitiveness, upgrading of our efforts, and what cluster initiatives also can do in this context as we look beyond COVID. And so I think that at least is very hopeful to be able not just to talk about the immediate crisis response. And I think Maretta already talked about some of the things that we've done also in the TCI network that really revealed how critical, especially cluster organizations, have been in that moment of crisis. And I think maybe, that was also an opportunity for us to learn more about what are really some of the key assets that cluster organizations have. And those key assets are often around trust and linkages and the ability to really engage, especially, small and medium-sized business owners in your region, in your country, and bringing them in contact with what government agencies are trying to do to support them. So I think that was an important phase. But now what we want to do is kind of to look a little bit ahead. And of course, what better place to do that than in Asia. Asia looked like the big winner of this pandemic on a global scale. I think in some ways it's still true. But of course, as always, I think economists like to say it depends. And it depends on what Asian countries, what Asian governments are going to do in the future. I think the reality is that also still in Asia, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of unanswered questions. As I mentioned, I think Asian economies or Asian countries were very successful in dealing with the initial rounds of COVID. The way to handle the healthcare crisis was generally viewed as more effective than in more advanced economies in the West, in Europe and in North America. But now I think we see some backtracking, partly because vaccination has been a good deal slower in many parts of Asia. And we now see the new variants of the virus coming out. India, of course, had a very terrible experience about a month ago. I think that the situation is improving, but even now countries like your neighbors in Vietnam, if you're in Cambodia today, are kind of locking down again more, limiting the number of large meetings and so on. So I think there is still a lot of uncertainty about how things will evolve in the future related to how the healthcare crisis is going to look out. But I'm going to focus more on the economic aspects and really think about how can we kind of get a handle on what will happen to our economies as we move forward. And some of you might have seen this picture before, but I think it's still kind of useful to frame our thinking around what's the scenarios that are ahead. So this black line, is the GDP growth over time. We had this initial reduction of GDP, and then the question was, how quickly are we going to go up and what's going to happen afterwards? That initial impact and the speed at which you recover depends essentially on two things. It depends on why there was this downturn, and it depends on how quickly you respond. The reason that I think we've seen a very deep shutdown or a deep cut in GDP was, of course, that it was a combined demand and supply shock. So kind of people were not allowed to travel. They were not allowed to consume. They couldn't go out and shop. At the same time, it was also on the supply side that companies couldn't operate. They didn't have access to the supplies and so on. They had to shut down their production facilities. And that happened on a global scale, on a much larger scale than what we usually see in macroeconomic crisis. So no surprise that we had a very deep fall in economic activity. At the same time, however, it's also true that this crisis was not driven by deep macroeconomic imbalances. And if you think back to the global financial crisis, or in your part of the world, the Asian financial crisis much earlier, those were the result of large macroeconomic imbalances. And what that means is, as you're trying to work your way out of the crisis, you have to kind of rework to kind of improve your balance sheets in the households and the governments and so on. And that takes time. These are periods where you have to save to kind of build up the capital stock that you kind of didn't have, and that led to the crisis initially. None of this was the case during this crisis. In fact, I think in the Western world, largely because of the policy response, we've seen the opposite. Bankruptcy numbers have gone down dramatically. Cash flows in companies look quite strong because they also responded very quickly. And household balance sheets are also very strong. So there's a lot of cash, billions and billions of cash that are waiting to be reinvested and consumed around the world. So all of this, combined with the really strong policy response in terms of what central banks have done and what ministries of finance have done, I think should help us to move up very quickly. But if we think about what's going to happen more long-term, what does the future hold? Actually, I think the more interesting question, the more important question is what is going to happen to trend growth? And so this is what I'm going to focus on. How can we think about the impact of the pandemic on competitiveness as the ultimate driver of trend growth overall? And I'll argue that, I think this is sort of a kind of an underappreciated part of the policy debate. One other factor that's kind of unique and very important to keep in mind for this crisis, and actually also for what's going to come next in terms of policy responses, is that it has been a crisis where understanding the average doesn't tell you sufficiently what's going on in different parts of your countries, in different sectors of your economy, and for different parts of your society. We have seen very differential outcomes, on those that were able to be digitalized quickly, that were able to work from home, maybe those that were in manufacturing, but activity quickly recovered, versus those that did not have those opportunities and continue to be heavily affected by the crisis. This is something that we have to keep in mind as we think about our policy response and what that might lead to. What I want to argue here is that, at least in the West, and that might be something more, to reflect upon how that also applies, or whether that also applies in Asia. But what I see in the OECD economies in Western Europe, in the United States and North America, is we're currently having a policy debate that, as I'm arguing here, is doing only half its job. I think people are very happy that the GDP forecasts have improved significantly. But the entire discussion, I think, is really focused on our macroeconomic response, which by many measures was stellar. I think we learned a lot from the global financial crisis. Central banks quickly came to the rescue. We did not have a freezing down of capital markets. All of that worked well. We had fiscal responses that really make sure that we could put our economies in the freezer, and we didn't see companies go out of business just because there was a short-term liquidity constraint. But what I'm somewhat worried about is that there is a sort of a new consensus emerging also about the future path beyond the crisis response on macroeconomics that I think is at least quite risky. First of all, I think there is a very simplified view that, the more stimulus you give, the more growth you get, and that's unequivocally a good thing. And so, when one of the bank economists had a very interesting comparison here in Europe, arguing that basically, the US is spending so much more money, higher growth, and Europe is failing because we're spending less money in terms of stimulus. This logic only holds because people say, well, but usually these type of things lead to overheating and inflation, and then you need to stop the economy. But now there is a consensus that no, yes, we have seen inflation go up, but it's only temporary. And obviously, I think you see prices move up as as economies recover, as we see spending coming online and so on. But this will not stay. There is not a change. This consensus argued in our expectations of what inflation will look like. And then finally, there's also a sense that financing stimulus is not a problem. As long as nominal GDP growth is higher than the interest rate, basically you can afford as government to run up more debt because still the debt to GDP ratio will go down. So you effectively never have to pay this money back. That's sort of the new consensus that seems to be emerging, quite different from the situation that we had certainly before the global financial crisis. The question is, one, on the macroeconomics, is this really true? I think there are a lot of unknowns. It's quite feasible or possible that this will turn out to be the right view, but we still know too little, especially I would say about long-term trends in interest rates and in real interest rates to be certain that this will work out. And the downside is, of course, is if interest rates go up again, we are going to face massive public debt problems and other issues in our economies. But more importantly, I think if we think about the big challenges we as societies are facing, climate change, social cohesion, and so on, these are really not macro issues. And I think there's very little evidence that simply providing more stimulus is going to address them. They might be helpful. It's always easier to change if there's a kind of a vibrant, high growth economy, but it's not sufficient. And so that's why I think our focus here on microeconomic competitiveness and the role of clusters is really absolutely critical to make sure that we're not committing a very big policy mistake. Now let's quickly look at the situation in Asia. Initially, I think we had very decisive public health action, as I mentioned, so the downturn was much lower. And then in response, though, the macro stimulus has been much less pronounced than in the West, partly because it was needed. But I think there's also a mix. A lot of Asian developing economies don't have the resources to really spend heavily in terms of supporting their economies. China has the resources and has done quite a bit, but it also has a huge debt overload already. And so I think the government has been somewhat more cautious and going overboard as they did in the response to the global financial crisis and responding with spending. But the quick question is really also for Asia, what's going to happen to trend growth? Now, the way that we think about that is, traditionally, I think in our economic models, and as we look at competitiveness, we find a strong evidence that the competitiveness fundamentals, what you see here in the green box, is kind of driving economic outcomes. And so, we ought to look at the competitiveness fundamentals. At the moment, there has been relatively limited impact on those due to the pandemic. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And so that should allow at least for us to continue on the growth path. But I think what I will argue is that we also have to think about how the global economic context has changed. So where our fundamentals, our capabilities and assets that drive competitiveness might be valued more now than they have been in the past or less. We have to think through those because there's been a huge change through the pandemic, and maybe also how our policymaking is changing. I think we have new goals and potentially also new processes in place that could lead to quite different economic policy outcomes. So let's run through these and think a little bit about how they play out in Asia. And I'll start with the top right-hand corner and then kind of go counterclockwise through these quadrants. So if we look at the impact on economic outcomes, again, Asia was doing much better in 2020. East Asia actually had not a reduction of GDP growth, but just smaller GDP growth, was one of the few global regions where we continued to see GDP growth through 2020. But we still expect a strong recovery in 21, although, in places like India, I think that's less clear whether or not the resurgence of the virus will limit growth rates a little bit more. But then you also see a decrease further on. So it's not clear that this necessarily means that there will be higher trend growth. It only, so far, I think we're only seeing the impacts on the short-term kind of impact and recovery from the crisis. Now, if you look on the competitiveness fundamentals, in principle, you could argue that the crisis really hasn't changed anything in terms of our physical infrastructure, our rules and regulations. Capital markets are still functioning. The skills of people are the same. Companies often exist. We've made sure that they don't go bankrupt. So what is the impact? Probably quite little. But what we know from other crises is that there are actually, and you see that in these red dots or in the red text here on the slide, there are channels more in terms of investment that's not happening, or existing capital stock that gets eroded because companies go out of business and there is more change that could affect where we are. We don't know quite yet. The IMF, interestingly, has put out a somewhat more pessimistic view. You see here the red bars are the ones for their COVID projection. The blue ones are for the global financial crisis. And you start by the world average. So overall, much less of an impact through COVID, which is, I think, in line with a quick recovery. But somewhat interestingly, if you compare the second to the left-hand side, which is the advanced economies, almost no long-term impact. However, emerging economies, the second from the right, significantly, lower than after the global financial crisis, but significantly higher downturn in terms of growth compared to advanced economies. So I think there is something really to be concerned about for emerging economies, and that, of course, also includes Latin America and so on. But I think it is a lot about Asia, whether we actually see a good short-term outcome, but maybe actually not such a positive longer-term outcome. The big changer, I think, that a game changer that we've seen through the pandemic, I think, is maybe not so much through the classical impact of the macroeconomic crisis on our fundamentals, but it is really through how the world has been changing. And of course, a lot of people talk about mega trends. Many of those existed before. Maretta and Patricia talked about sustainability, digitalization, and so on. All of this has been going on, but you have to rethink on how they have been affected by the crisis. Some, like digitalization, have been massively accelerated. Others, maybe not so much. Maybe populism has actually kind of been reined in because we have a stronger focus on effective government and to deal with that. Sustainability may be less clear on what's going to happen. It was very important before, wasn't directly impacted by the pandemic. Globalization is another topic. I think that's important and is actually critical for these export-oriented Asian economies. So let's take a little bit closer look at this. Now, on the left-hand side, you see, one of the favorite indicators that many people look at in terms of globalization was this export share of global GDP. And what you see is, this rapid rise from the 1990s to the global financial crisis, driven by China, many Asian economies actually fueling their growth path. Since then, there was a drop and then basically stability. So it looked like, maybe globalization is over. And the first prognosis of the COVID impact was that global trade was going to drop by 30%. We now know that it hasn't happened, but I think it's also important to ensure that you understand that this average number actually doesn't tell you quite that much. There have been a lot of economies, including in your part of the world, Vietnam and Korea, among the large exporters, there are smaller countries that also did quite well, that continue successfully to follow the export-led growth model. That the global average is not developing anymore is largely due to China. And it's not because China is trading less, but it's because China is growing more domestically in its economy. So think you have to have a more nuanced view. But it is true that even in terms of globalization, I think it's less goods and services that flow, it's more data, people, capital, ideas, and trends. And if that's the case, every emerging Asian economy has to think about how that will affect its place in the global value chain. Should it double down and follow the traditional export-led model, with low labor costs, manufacturing, and so on? Is there room for it? Or are there other things that need to be done? And if so, how should that affect its policy mix? What has been accelerated, I would say, is kind of the politics around globalization. I think there's a lot of focus in the major markets of the OECD on resilience. And partly it is because, we're shocked to see how dependent we are on very few suppliers in China, sometimes India, sometimes other parts of Asia, for critical inputs. For example, the most advanced semiconductors, 100% of them currently are produced in Taiwan and Korea. 80% in Taiwan, 20% in Korea. So this is a very central input for many of our industries, including automotive. I think you will see a policy response that there's more focus on building regional value chains to be somewhat less reliant on very few foreign markets. There's also the concern about geopolitics, about the way that China is acting, which is not only driven by economics, but a lot by kind of power politics. And that, I think, will also see a response from the West. And the third element is that there's increasing connection between sustainability and global trade. So the discussion of the carbon border tax is not so much about whether it will come, but what form it will take. And so every Asian economy has to think about how it can comply with these standards in order to be not thrown out of the global value chains. And I think that's a key issue for many countries. I've looked at India, I've looked at Vietnam. We've seen CO2 emissions go rapidly up. And I think that will be problematic in this new context. Finally, it's kind of the policy-making context. And I think we've seen here, we've heard that also from Maretta, it's both green transition, it's inclusion, and it's government's ability also in healthcare to deliver basic services that is much more in demand than simple headline GDP growth. And I think it's even more so because this crisis has weighed so heavily on the poor and less skilled compared to kind of other crises that we've seen in the past. We know that Asia has made big strides, especially in reducing poverty, but we also have to see that there's lots to do and that there are many areas in which Asian economies are still behind because the focus has been squarely on GDP growth. So I think this will be a key topic that will shape the discussion also in Asia. Finally, there are a lot of people that talk about this crisis as an opportunity. And I think that some of the research that I've done with a few colleagues indicate that on average, that's actually not true. On average, crises are bad for competitiveness dynamics, and that's because of the scaring effects that we talked about earlier, less investment in R&D and so on. But it can be an opportunity if it kind of shakes up old power structures and you are able to do new things that are important, and you knew they were important for driving productivity growth, but now they become politically feasible. So kind of thinking in a smart way about what that response will look like, I think is critical also for Asia. What that will require, I think, will be strategy. It's really about, there's a new global map around you. Many things have changed. How do you make the right steps today that will define your path as an economy, as a company, as a cluster for many years to come? And that only happens with strategy, thinking about where you want to go, thinking about your value proposition, and then think about the type of policies, both cluster specific, location specific, national, regional, and so on, that you can to apply it. And then have a delivery structure to do that. Let me close up. I'm going over time here, so let me just summarize some of the key points here. So I think the COVID impact, Asia has been doing great in the first phase of the crisis, and there's a lot that this part of the world should be, proud of. But I think now the outlook looks a little bit more questionable given the low vaccination rate. And I definitely don't think it's time for complacency. I think it's really time to use the advantages that you have as a region, that you have been less affected by the health crisis than Europe or North America, but it will require action. don't be fooled by the US or Western debate on macroeconomic policies. I'm not sure that is actually the case in Asia, but the critical part will be combining kind of modern macroeconomic policy that enables kind of sound demand growth, but combines that with competitiveness upgrading that really makes those structural reforms that are necessary to address our societal challenges, drive productivity, and so on. Asia has a huge positive position at the moment. You know, I think the pandemic has driven that drive of the heart of the global economy towards Asia. But it's also true that it has put your growth model, I think, under the microscope. And I think countries will have to evolve. They have to rethink what they are doing in terms of export-led growth, labor arbitrage, and so on. That will be less powerful. It's not going to go away, but it's going to be less powerful in the future. So setting a strategy, thinking about your goals, and then as you want to do that, that's where competitiveness and clusters will be critical, because they bring together exactly that type of platforms, the cluster organization, competitiveness councils in your countries, where you can have that debate that goes across ministries and sets out the course for your economy. So let me thank you for today. And it's been a pleasure to have a chance to talk a little bit about what's going on in Asia.
Thank you very much, Christian. Great. This is great presentation. We are going now open some time for questions to Christian, to Merete, if you may have. Please make use of the chat. And meanwhile, Christian, we have one question here from Piang Ratana. He's asking us directly when the world will be back to normal. Do you have the crystal ball or some indication?
I don't, you know, I mean, obviously, I think, what is the world? I do think that North America and Europe will be largely back to pretty normal, at least by early next year. I think now vaccination is going fast, and so I think that will be the case. For other parts of the world, I think it might take longer. Asia is for me hard to tell. I'm not sure how serious, the new flare-ups of virus are. What I heard from my Vietnamese colleagues that I'm working with yesterday was more, that they are preparing for kind of quite a long period of kind of lower intensity fighting COVID. And that leads me to the second point, what's back to normal? I don't think we're going back to normal. I think we're going to go back to a new normal. It will not be everything different, but I do think some things will be different. And, as you and Merete also discussed, TCI will look different. There will be more digital things that we do also in the future, independently of what has happened. So I think it may be more important to think about what will this new normal look like, and how can you prepare for that, rather than trying to pinpoint the exact timing that will be there.
And Christian, you talk about it's time for a strategy. Could you give us some examples of strategies that have where we can inspire at, or places that you think are going in the right direction, at least in some of the aspects that you have mentioned?
Yeah, I would say this is still evolving, but I think what we can see is that the countries also in Asia that have been successful have had a very clear strategy. So, I have the opportunity at the moment to work in Vietnam, enormously successful in terms of export-led growth, a lot of FDI coming in, poverty is going down. And so I think that was a strategy that worked really well the last 2 decades. They've managed the macroeconomics problems of capital inflows and so on. But I think now they have to rethink their model, because value added in Vietnam is still very low. I mean, they've moved into telecom production, so they are in attractive sectors. But excuse me. But I think in the new world, where kind of labor costs are not the only thing, where environmental costs are a bigger concern, they will need a new strategy. It's not there yet, but I think it's important for them to see that, now we need to adjust. So I think even for successful Asian countries, I think this is an important priority.
Thank you. And Merete, you are involved in some European advisory groups, and we are very present in the European discussions, Christian, as well. But the question is to you: what do you see in Europe? It's different and should be inspiration for Asian countries.
Yeah, I think thank you, Christian, for an always interesting presentation and sharing, bigger perspectives on how to connect both the macroeconomic and the micro. So I think actually that's a recommendation coming from Europe, trying to connect those elements in a strategy. And it's not super simple because, but I think this is one of the learnings coming out of the crisis, that we need to have both. And I think one other comment you made, Christian, on that politics matters. It can be designed, but we also need to think carefully about how to do this right. And I think some of the current discussions we see in many countries, and again, going also a little bit bottom up, trying to understand the trends, where is the economy going? I can see that the Basque country is represented here today, and I see some very nice things happening there, talking with the clusters and the institutions on the level, on the ground, saying what is happening in your sectors, how could we adapt, how could we put in place specific instruments that can really help. And I think this more cross-sectoral is another element that hopefully will come out of the crisis. We tend to a little bit to focus on the silos, but I think going across is very important also. But there's I think there's several regions in Europe. I think the Basque country is always a great place to be inspired. I think some places in Germany, I know the MOC network will meet also in Germany in late September. I think also many German regions use this opportunity to rethink their strategies as well.
Christian, this is one question for you. In the new normal, will cluster hubs and networks play a more important role than previously? From Ken Charman.
Yeah, so I would argue yes. Partly because I think what we've seen is that a lot of the traditional assets, capital and so on, have become more fungible, accessible globally. But what is actually hard to create or recreate is connections, is trust, is type of linkages. So I think economies that are able to provide that, clusters that are able to provide that, cross-cluster collaborations that is able to provide that, I think will provide an advantage. And I think that is actually, there's a lot of talk about resilience, certainly in Europe and the US in the moment. I think that provides you with much more resilience. To have partners means you have options, you can adjust together. And that's maybe, the better way, rather than to say, no, we have to build a parallel supply chain within Europe or within the US that would exclude Asia.
Thank you, Christian. And this question to Merete before we move to the next part of the program is from Asda, and is asking on green transition, how can we persuade both potential supplier and buyer to take the sustainable alternative during this pandemic, especially for developing countries? So this has to be with the ecosystem of cluster and how to involve more in this mindset of a sustainable approach.
It's a really good question. Also a question we have been discussing a lot within the network, because I think for some it's still the journey of understanding the business model and the potential in this. It's also an area where I can see that especially the governments can take a role, saying we need to put in place instruments that can help the SMEs to go into the journey of redefining their business model into a more sustainable thing. So definitely a place where the policy again matters, and where instruments, both with understanding the potential, but also putting in place funding opportunities for helping SMEs to take the journey. I think I do see many, also especially in Africa, we do have many great cases on countries making that transition. Ghana and Kenya, we do see some cases also in South Africa, as I mentioned, Green Cape, our perhaps world biggest green cluster ever. So there are instruments in place, somebody taking the role of changing the mindset. I think in terms of the persuasion, I think it's a little bit leaning on some of the perhaps the leaders in the sectors. So identifying some of the ones that saw the business model, have made the transition, and then you can help to showcase this to the outside world. I think there's more consumer push. I know it's different, of course, in the developing country with less options for, for buying. But I do also see there's an interest in taking, better care of your also local environment and paying for that to some extent. But of course, it's a challenge that the green products and services actually need to have the same level of cost like ordinary products as well.
Thank you very much, Merete, Christian. Great to have you here. And we continue with the program. See you in the next TCI place or activity. Bye. Now let's move to new forms of collaboration in Asia. And I want to welcome to be with me to Tony Lim from E3 Taiwan. Hello, welcome, Tony.
Hello, Patricia. Great to see everyone again in the TCI activities.
Great to see you and to have you with us. And the other speaker will be Rustam Mashrupov from Kazakhstan. Hello, Rustam. Welcome.
Hello. Glad to see you. Thank you for invitation to that event.
Excellent. Very glad to have you two with us. Tony, let's start with you. You are going to introduce us to how you are enhancing digital competitiveness of SMEs in Taiwan. The floor is yours. You can share your screen if you want.
Yep. Okay, let me show my screen for the moment. Okay. So can you see that? My slides?
Yes,
okay,
we can see it.
Okay, so everyone is okay with that? Can you see that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Patricia. And actually, I'm really happy to have this opportunity to meet everyone and share our experience again. And so this is Tony Lim from E3 Taiwan. Today, I'm going to talk about E3's case when it comes to new forms of collaboration of clusters in this pandemic and post-pandemic time. So in this presentation, I will, first of all, I will introduce what E3 is doing for creating more collaborations. And then I will turn to two case studies. The first one is about the digital transformation of Taiwan SME. This time, I will focus on how E3 collaborates with Taiwan government, IT solution providers, SME, and other organizations for conducting cloud solution marketplace. And the second part will be focused on the different territory, biotech. This year, my department has worked with E3's Biotech Center, and we established this TIPIC platform in order to promote more innovative cooperation, not just in Taiwan, but also in the international society. Finally, I will give my conclusion. So let's just get started. So first of all, let me just do a short introduction about E3. E3 means Industrial Technology Research Institute. In the beginning, it was a government-funded research institute focusing on the ICT application. But now it's a financial independent cluster organization with 6,000 employees. Now E3 is not just an R&D institute, but also providing the consulting service, organizing the clusters, and promoting the collaborations of industries. E3 can be separated into 4 different territories. The first one is smart living, which focuses on the smart city applications and solutions, quality health, which focuses on, of course, the biotech application and the anti-pandemic innovation, sustainable environment, which focuses on the green energy and the cleaning technology. And finally, of course, the ICT enabling technology, which focuses on the ICT innovation and advanced solutions like AI. So in this pandemic, E3 also faced some new challenges. the huge, like a huge demand from the anti-pandemic biotech application, the Taiwan's current lockdown, and the resilient issue of the supply chain. So it seems that we really need new kind of collaboration when it comes to the cluster, and how to collaborate inside and outside E3 under this Taiwan's current lockdown situation. So E3 turns to three codes: co-creation, co-production, and co-innovation. E3 would like to build and empower the linkage among the government, the academic institutes, the industries, and the other kind of social organizations. And by doing this, all kind of organizations can gather their resource and information, moving further on creation, production, and innovation issues together. So how does E3 do that? I would like to use the 7 cluster gap model from the Dr. Orion Soviels in the Stockholm School of Economics to describe that. Actually, E3 is playing the role of bridge builders, which identify each party's needs and resource. And then E3 will build a bridge, helping each party's matchmaking and cooperations. And in order to do that, E3 has developed an analysis method to identify the needs and the resource and build a strong network of cross-sectors to do the communications. I will give everyone a short example now. So the following case is my department's help the E3's Biotech Center to collaborate with UK startups this year. And our biocenter has a great development of biomedical materials and equipments. This year, they want to start a project of brain surgery equipment. So they are looking for some international partners who also focus on this issue. We use cluster analysis method to review the biotech clusters in Taiwan and in the EU areas. Finally, we help build a cooperation between our biotech centers and the UK startups from the Imperial College of London. So let's just move to the first big case, digital transformation. I will talk about our findings and research on this topic on tomorrow's presentation. But today I will focus on how we build a bridge among the governments and other industrial institutes. And finally, we work together to build a cloud solution market platform. So 2 years, actually, let me just describe a story. 2 years ago, SME agency of Taiwan government tried to find a new way to help Taiwan SMEs to improve their digital capability. But actually they know the pure subsidy policy would be useless because SME still have no idea when they receive that money. So SME agency asked us to form a new kind of policy initiative and find some cooperative partners. Finally, we decided to refer to Singapore's policy and provide a policy proposal of conducting a national cloud solution market platform. Every SME can just log in this platform and receive the subsidy. And then they can use this kind of subsidy to purchase every cloud-based solution they want. And these solutions include almost all the digital tools that SME will use, like remote work, CRM, cluster relationship management, and some of office software. And I have to say, what a coincidence, because this platform started to operation today. So actually, my mailbox is full of the promotion of the promotion message of this platform now. So what a coincidence. And actually, another thing is about that we are also going to publish a guidebook of digital transformation for the Taiwan SME. The reason is that we think SME might not know how to do even they buy by those cloud solutions from the platform. Therefore, we would like to publish a book showing some examples and the basic knowledge of digital transformation. This book will include why SME need to do the digital transformation and some case study they can see or apply, and some suggestion from us and all the public resource they can use. Actually, we are considered to publish English version, so I hope I can just share this kind of book in the TCI Global Conference, hopefully. So the second case is about the TIPIC, Taiwan Integrated Biomedical Industrial Center. Actually, this is a national project. Our biotech center cooperating with us and support by the government. When it comes to the biomedical industries, of course, we know there are so many regulations constrain the development of biomedical innovations. So our government would like to build a sandbox area which allows all the organization to do some, smart application and innovation of biotech in this area. Once the solution is approved safe and useful, it can be commercialized. And our job is simple: help the biocenter to organize this place and try to promote that. So TIPIC has three functions: verification, simulation, and ecosystem. To sum up, verification is that the company or startups in this center need to prove their smart solutions will be safe, useful, and matching every biomedical regulations. And then simulation is that we provide some, hospital environment to company to test their solutions. Finally, we would like to, get a different kind of biotech institutes and form a new kind of biotech ecosystem. And we have 4 goals for this center. First, it has an excellent development of, in the ICT territory. We would like to combine our strength of ICT with biotech. Second, in this center, we would like to, export our solutions to international society and import innovative solutions from our foreign partners. And the third, MOEA, or the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Taiwan government, try to build a national demo site of biotech in this center. And finally, we also, try to develop a one-stop process of biotech R&D in this center. And when it comes to the business model of this center, TIPIC have multiple ways. The first one is, of course, the service fee from the verification and the test. This part is also the main income source of TIPIC now. And the second part is from the training program and the consulting service. We receive some kind of fee once some company or startup who really need this kind of service. And finally, in the future, we would like to see the demo site and the international cooperation can, create more opportunities. So, and this slide just shows that we are looking for, more international partnerships. So if you are interested in biotech or, any kind of ICT application in the medical territory, or any good idea related to the topic, maybe relate to the biotech or maybe relate to the digital transformation, please contact us. So let me just jump to the conclusion. I think in our experience, we think before we build a bridge for the collaboration, the one thing we need to do is try to find out what people really need. Because we just find that sometimes what people say they want is not equal to what they really need. So we really need to find out that and do the right matchmaking. The second part is that the cross-domain or cross-industries collaborations really need time to explore and find a new opportunity. But this kind of process is necessary. The final part is that we think that deep collaboration will be related to the shared value topic. And if you are interested in this shared value topic, please join tomorrow's presentation. So this is my today's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. This was great. Very interesting. I really like the two things that you point out. One is to find out the needs. So to talk to stakeholders, that's crucial. In these collaboration processes, it's very necessary to be in constant dialogue with stakeholders, with all the actors involved in the ecosystem to detect the needs and to properly map the capacities, I think, inside the cluster and the cluster ecosystem. And then the cross-industry cooperation, this cross-cluster collaboration that is everywhere. I think the key is how to make it in practice, because usually you find different mindsets, different ways of working, and so on. So it's really a challenge to work in this cross-cluster collaboration. Thank you very much. We're going to show now the video of the TB cluster.
Nice.
Thank you, Tony. Can we start the video now, please?
The advances in technology and AI have driven medical care to leapfrog into a new generation. Smart medical care, which incorporates ICT and big data, has become a global trend. Taiwan is the perfect place for smart medical care, aiming to reduce the time to market of products. The Department of Industrial Technology, under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, has joined hands with multiple sectors and the medical community to create the Taiwan Integrated Biomedical Industrial Center, the first of its kind here. The center will provide testing, verification, and commercialization services for innovative smart medical devices, allowing manufacturers to adjust their products as fast as possible. Professional market regulatory consultation and prompt feedback from clinicians will also be provided to accelerate product development. TIBIC consists of 6 areas: the Human Factor and Usability Engineering Laboratory, the Surgical Robot Verification Laboratory, the Computed Tomography Simulation Room, the Intensive Care Unit Simulation Room, the Operating Simulation Room, and the Simulation Hospital General Ward. In the Human Factor and Usability Engineering Laboratory, clinicians will engage in the clinical use of medical devices and provide immediate feedback. The Surgical Robot Verification Laboratory will utilize real-time imaging robots to assist doctors in carrying out precision surgical procedures. The Computer Tomography Simulation Room will have computers reconstruct 3D images of the body, greatly enhancing diagnostic accuracy. Meanwhile, the Intensive Care Unit Simulation Room will provide real-time monitoring of patient physiological data and any changes detected. The information will be uploaded and reported to medical staff. The Operating Simulation Room will focus on the simulation and verification of clinical surgical instruments, which will accelerate the adjustment of medical devices. Lastly, innovative applications for smart medical devices and medical data will be the emphasis in the Simulation Hospital General Ward, thus satisfying multiple needs. In the future, the center will also provide human-machine usability testing and verification of smart medical devices. Product developers can thus receive continuous feedback needed in product development based on various clinical surgical scenarios, and can find innovative solutions and offer customized services for major international manufacturers. eTree is also cooperating with international companies such as AstraZeneca through its advantages in market size, distribution channels, and brand visibility, ITRI will lead domestic industries and related products to tap into the global market. Meanwhile, it is expected that international vendors will also be able to find comprehensive medical solutions in this center, exploring new opportunities in biomedical technology.
This was a snapshot of the cluster work of this health cluster in Taiwan. And now we move to Kazakhstan, and we want to learn from Rustam on the latest update of the cluster policy. They have been supporting a portfolio of clusters in the last year, and he's going to update us on the situation to date. Hello, Rustam, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Let me demonstrate my monitor. So, before I would like to welcome all participants of conference, and thank you very much for invitation. And it's a wonderful opportunity for Kazakhstan to be there and represent our work with cluster policy. Let's begin. Within the framework of the World Bank project called Improving the Competitiveness of SMEs in Kazakhstan, Kazindustry was the operator for the implementation of the development of territorial clusters. Our foreign partners, as you can see on slide, represented by the European Foundation for Cluster Excellence and Competitiveness, as well as INFIDE, took part in this project, which provided us with full support. Recently, we have made research on competitiveness of every region in Kazakhstan, and also talked to SMEs as a result of careful selection based on our own methodology, which included 44 quantitative and qualitative criteria. We chose 6 strategic clusters. It's furniture, construction, pharmaceutical, floor milling, dairy, and tourism cluster. So then, during the implementation of 4 stages of cluster policy in Kazakhstan, there were core players within cluster emerged. Secondly, development strategies were jointly developed. Then the number of cluster participants increased by 67%. Eventually, the rules for state support measures were developed by Kazindustry and are currently under approval. What has been done today? Strengthening of cooperation between the cluster participants contributed to the optimization of the cost of products by 10%. 5 memoranda of mutual cooperation were signed between universities and the main participants of clusters. Joint activities within the cluster allowed us to enter new markets. For example, the pharmaceutical cluster has been supplying medicines to Uzbekistan since 2019, and the furniture cluster annually participates in exhibition events in Uzbekistan. So, joint activities within the cluster allowed us to expand in the domestic market. Also, the construction cluster has started to work on analyzing the possibilities of producing eco-friendly building construction materials from local raw materials and industrial waste. A visit of representatives of the Spanish construction cluster was organized to get acquainted with the possibilities of domestic production of building materials, as well as a trip of Kazakhstan representatives to Spain to study technologies for the modernization of all buildings and structures, also the construction of eco houses. Combining the participants into a cluster allowed furniture manufacturers to provide joint suppliers to hotel chains and travel companies. Negotiations were held with the Calidad Institute from Spain on the possibilities of introducing quality standards in accommodation facilities, as well as encouraging the hotel business to participate in certification, which will create conditions for competition between certification systems and conformity marks. And the packaging materials of dairy products were rebranded, which contributed to a sharp increase in sales. Now we have new approach to the development of cluster policy in Kazakhstan. Its strategic priority. It means defining the status of territorial cluster in the legal field. That status assumes that there is a priority in obtaining incentive measures for cluster members. Second, cluster diagnostics and cluster observatory formation includes diagnostics in the regional context of cluster initiatives, formation of cluster observatory on declarative basis, ranking of cluster by level of development, and defining criteria for selection of cluster projects, taking into account the priorities of the states, for example, global value chain or innovations. Third one, incentive measures. Based on review of the pool of key projects, focused phased co-financing of cluster project is carried out. To effectively implement the cluster project, counter obligation will be set for the cluster participants. For example, release of an innovative group of products, expansion of markets, or labor productivity growth. Fourth one, monitoring the implementation of cluster projects consists of monitoring of counter obligations, further scaling, and identification of new promising direction for the development of territorial clusters. All joint activities will be implemented in accordance with the industrial and innovation policy of Kazakhstan. And final slide shows us the key projects of clusters. As we can see, construction cluster has a project with producing eco-friendly building materials from local raw materials and waste, industrial waste. Project of furniture cluster is producing contract furniture. This means provision of complex interior solutions for hotels and tourist facilities. Project of pharmaceutical cluster developing the production of phytomedicines from local herbal raw materials. Project of dairy cluster is expanding the line of milk processing products, for example, powdered milk, yogurts, and cheese. Project of floor milling, creating a technological service center for diagnostics and repair of modern milling equipment. And the tourism cluster has a project which is improving the quality standards of the domestic tourism industry. In the end, I want to say that our clusters are moving in line with the trends of the growing vector of green economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rustam. This was very nice. We are going now to open also some time for questions. for Rustam and for Tony. So let us know if you have any questions on the chat. Meanwhile, I would like to start with Rustam also, and very happy to see this evolution of the cluster policy in Kazakhstan, and that the work with clusters is expanding. And I especially like this strategic view, the strategy that you have designed for each of the clusters. I think this is something quite unique that you can achieve through collaborative approach, this shared vision and mission of the clusters with a concrete strategy behind. Can you share us with us, Rustam, maybe a little bit, because I know in many regions in Asia, they have this challenge to start, how to start the cluster work or a cluster policy. Can you share with us some of your journey?
Firstly, we analyzed the specializations of our regions in Kazakhstan. Their strong competitive directions. For example, we have regions that strong in machinery. We have regions that strong in pharmaceutical industry, but it doesn't mean that business SMEs are ready to collaborate and work together. We had a bad experience with cluster policy in '96, and the second phase of cluster policy in Kazakhstan, which began in 2016, we started to visit SMEs and ask them if they are ready to collaborate with each other, if they're ready to work together, if they are ready to help each other. And then we started to work after, of course, after our careful, after that we chose 6 clusters. We started to work with them and puts in their mind that cluster policy, that idea of clusters is next level of business that they can achieve and improve their business. So it took 2 years of involvement of working together with SMEs for their changing views. After 2 years of work, they said that we hadn't incentive measures yet, but that we made is important. This is now business, now SMEs work together, work with each other on solve their problems together, and it's very good experience, and I think it's not so high level that we achieved, but we have made some changes with our business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Rustam, so important what you say about socializing the benefits of clustering and trying to involve all the different actors in the policy side, in the business side, in all the triple, quadruple, quintuple helix, to have the same vision of what you can achieve through clusters, and how this collaborative approach can be useful for the country. In your case, I think that's key when I started the cluster policy, how to visualize also where we want to be, what will be the aim of this. I kindly ask you to stop sharing so that we can see bigger your faces. If you stop sharing your presentation, we can also see, and the chat is getting more active. I will go with one question for Tony now. Very good to hear both from Taiwan and Kazakhstan that the SME business-driven approach is very integrated, says Merete. And how have you handled when the companies aren't seeking the same? Tony, how do you manage the interests of different groups?
Actually, that always happens. I have to say that always happens. Just take our, digital transformation project as an example. Actually, so many SME just say, okay, I don't want this, I want that. All I want is just, a mirror, a magical tool can help my, business can grow so fast and without any, and without any cost. And to handle with this problem, actually, of course, first of all, we need more communication. We need to, really realize what their demand is, and if we cannot, reach the consensus, if we cannot reach the conclusion, we might just, sadly, we need to refuse this case. Yeah, actually, that's always happened because even in the typical, we also refuse many cases because the SMEs or the company's target is not matching our typical target. So we just, sorry, but we have to say no. And there is one kind of situation, it's that so many companies just say no. And that means we need to adjust our, the future plan. So I think, that's really hard. That's really hard, but we still need to say no in order to, keep our project just, move to the goal we want.
That is good. That is bi-directional, right? That you all have to adapt your expectations and
indeed.
And it's also a matter of choices. And sometimes it's true that you have to leave things behind. It's another question for Rustam. What is the measurements of selection of your clusters? How you select the clusters and what measures you use, and if these clusters are export orientated?
Thank you for the question. Some of them, 5 of 6 clusters were export orientated, and we had tourism, which is also, we can say, export orientated. And as I said, we developed our methodology with a foreign partner in FIDE from Spain, and there were 22 qualitative criteria. That means, for example, we asked them for how they collaborate with each other. If there is any memoranda between university and the business. Also, we asked them if there are any students from these local regional universities that are working in these SMEs. And we had also 22 quantitative criteria that there was, for example, volume of production in the region of, for example, pharmaceutical industry. Also, there was volume of export of pharmaceutical or construction materials from that region. And we wanted to be like, you know, sorry, I forgot words.
No problem. Take your time. Yeah.
We wanted this methodology to be understandable for SMEs. Why we chose that 6 clusters. We had 18 applications for that competition, and 6 clusters that we get, pilot clusters, they were on top with that quantitative criteria and also qualitative criteria. It was I can share with that, if you want, I can share with you which criteria we took. And
I was going to suggest that, Rustam, thank you. That tool, we will share the contact of Rustam with you, and you can get in touch and go more into detail on these criteria, because it's very interesting and you probably want to know the detail of this. One last question, also to Rustam, says, congratulations for the progress on the 6 pilot clusters. How are you planning to extend the initiative to other clusters?
Thank you for the question. We are going to formate the cluster observatory. We will analyze, we will analyze specializations and specializations of regions. And then we also will expand that work, that work with 6 pilot clusters. We will expand on other clusters that we have in Kazakhstan. For example, we will meet with them. We will analyze their problems, their specializations, and we will. I think we will formate the cluster observatory that we can then after that we can work with that selected clusters in cluster observatory. We now I don't know how long how much time will it take, because now we have no incentive measures to support them, to co-financing their projects. Our rules of that measures now is under approval, and we are waiting for that. We are waiting for financing cluster, and as soon as it will, as soon as clusters get financing their projects, we will start to work with other clusters. And I think we will use our good experience with pilot clusters, and we will put also in their minds what is cluster policy and why they need to collaborate with each other, why they need to work with each other.
Excellent.
So I guess we will expand in 2-3 years, I guess, with other clusters.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good to know that the approach has worked well and you're planning to expand it. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, Rustam, for sharing with us your latest work. This has been great. Let's move to the next part of the program. Now we are planning to have a coffee or tea break if you need something. But meanwhile, we invite you to take your computer or mobile device where you are watching us to your coffee machine or tea pot, and meanwhile watch some interesting videos that my colleague John Loroño, our project developer in TCI, is going to introduce you to. Enjoy.
Thank you, Patricia, Tony, and Rustam. After those great cases from Taiwan and Kazakhstan, and as we have 10 minutes break before the next talk, I would like to share some of the recent work of our members in Mongolia and Japan. Let me share my screen.
Mongoлийн чацарганы кластерын анх дугаар форум. Монголын чацарганы кластерын анх дугаар форумын оролцогч та бүхэндээ салбарынхаа 60 илүү хугацааны түүхэн таймыг хураангуйлан хүргэж бид кластерын хөгжлийн загварлуу шилжиж байна. Гар урдын их сургуулийн профессор Майкл Портерийн өрсөлдөх чадрын микро эдийн засаг академик сүлжээнд 2008 онд Монгол Улсын их сургууль гишүүнчлэлтэй болсноос хойш Монгол улсад кластерын санаачилгын түүчийг бизнесийн орчинд Монголын жимс жимсэгний үндэсний холбоо анхлан хүлээн авч засгийн газар, эрдэм шинжилгээний байгууллагууд, компаниудаа холбон ажиллах гүүрийн үүргийг гүйцэтгэж байна. Монгол Улсын их сургуулийн эдийн засгийн тэнхимийн профессор, Монгол Улсын их сургуулийн эдийн засгийн хүрээлэнгийн захирал цэвэл маань Монголын жимс жимсэгний үндэсний холбоонд чацарганы кластерын багийн ахлагчаар ажиллаж, бид бүгд хамтдаа салбарын компаниудаараа зочлох кластерын дэмжих болон анхан шатны үйл ажиллагаанд дах шат амжилгыг эренб дараатай сайжруулсаар ирлээ. Чацарган жимсний тухайд уламжлалт газар тариалангийн салбартаа шинжилэл хийж, шин технологи, инновацийг турших замаар чацарганы онцлог бүтээгдэхүүнээр дотоодын хэрэгцээг хангаж, гадаадын хэрэглэгчдэд таниулан салбарын өрсөлдөх хүчийг байнга тасралтгүй дээшлүүлж, одоо бидэнд экспортын баримжаатай үндэсний өрсөлдөх давуу талаан дэлхийн түвшинд таниулах боломж нэгдэж байгаа юм. Чацарганы хөтөлбөр, жимс жимсэгний хөтөлбөрийг хэрэгжүүлснээр салбарын хөгжлийн бодлогын шийдвэр гаргалтад олон сургамжийг олж авсан төдийгүй салбарын нийлүүлэлтийн сүлжээнд сорилт их байгаач чацарганыг боловсруулах салбарт дулаан, гүйдэн, ууршуулан хатаа гаргахын технологи нэвтэрч компаниуд хүний эрүүл мэндэд ач тустай олон шинэ бүтээгдэхүүнийг үйлдвэрлэн нийлүүлж байна. Гадаадын төслүүд чацарганы салбарт хэрэгжснээр шууд бус эерэг дам нөлөөг үзүүлж кластерын оролцогчдын өрсөлдөх чадвар бэхжин дээшилж байна. Өртгийн сүлжээний анхан шатны үйл ажиллагаанд хөдөө аж ахуй технологи, аж үйлдвэрийн зохистой дадал тасралтгүй нэвтэрч, худалдан авах болон төлөхөд бэлэн байгаа хэрэглэгчиддээ тэдний хүсэл сонирхол, хэрэгцээнд нийцэх бүтээгдэхүүний судалгаа, хөгжүүлэлт эрчимжин, үндэсний манлайлах компаниудын тоо өсөх шат руугаан орлоо. Чацарганы салбарын экспортын стратегид гадаад худалдаа ба гадаадын хөрөнгө оруулалтын зохистой дэмжлэг зайлшгүй бөгөөд нише салбарын дэлхийн түвшинд таниулахад дэлхийн худалдааны байгууллагын эрх зүйн зохицуулалтыг үндэсний эрх зүйн зохицуулалтад гүйцэд тусган экспортын институцийн орчныг шинжлэх талаар бид олон талд хөгжлийн оролцогчдод хамтран ажиллаж байна. Монголын чацарганы анх дугаар форумд Монгол улсын чацарганы салбарын хөгжлийн бодлого, чацарганы кластерын санаачилгын үйл ажиллагаа, олон улсад өрсөлдөх боломжийн талаар танилцуулж, жазарганы экспортын төлөв байдлыг хэлэлцүүлэн, жазарганы өртгийн сүлжээний оролцогчдын дунд сонгосон асуудлаар хэлэлцүүлэг зохион байгуулж, Германы тариалагчдтай захимаар холбогдож ярилцсан, жазарганы кластерын гол тоглогчдон танилцуулж, экспортын стратегийг хэлэлцэх зорилготой. Энэ удаагийн форумыг Европын холбооны Трам төсөл, Германы Pro Value төсөл, Монголын үндэсний худалдаа аж үйлдвэрийн танхим дэмжиж, Монголын жимс жимсэгний үндэсний холбоо, Эко Эрдэнэ компани, Увс хүнс компани, Монгол Улсын их сургуулийн эдийн засгийн хүрээлэн хамтран зохион байгуулж, жазарганы кластерын гишүүд, салбарын компаниуд, орон нутгийн Монголын жазарганы кластерын анх дугаар форумын оролцогчид та бүхэндээ төлөөлөл, Монгол Улсын их сургуулиуд ба судалгааны байгууллагуудын профессор судлаачид, Монгол Улсын төрийн албан хаагчид, кластерыг дэмжих гадаадын болон дотоодын байгууллагууд оролцох юм а. Монголын жазарганы кластерын анх дугаар форумын оролцогчид та бүхэнд чин сэтгэлийн талархал илэрхийлж, жазарганы экспортын хөгжил цэцгэлтэнд оруулах санал санаачлагыг бид дэмжин ажиллах болно. Та бүхэндээ сайн сайхныг хүсэн өрөөе. Монголын жазарганы кластерын анх дугаар форум.
So we have watched the Mongolian CBOC third cluster initiative, and now let's watch the Kansai Biocluster video, a completely different sector, focus on technology and innovation. And as it is a long video and we don't have time to watch it completely, I will share the link in the chat later.
The Kansai region, located right in the middle of Japan, has maintained strong cultural and trade relationships with Asia since ancient times. The Union of Kansai Governments is Japan's first region-wide union to extend its reach across prefectural boundaries. Boasting over 2,000 years of history and culture, the region is home to a rich array of tourist resources and natural attractions. The scale of Kansai's economy is comparable to that of the Netherlands. Kansai is a major consumption area with a population of around 22 million and gross regional product of about 89 trillion yen. A diverse array of industries gather in Kansai, home to over 1 million business establishments consisting of various manufacturing industries, ranging from traditional crafts to advanced technological products and the industries supporting them. There is also a cluster of over 150 universities, world-renowned research institutes, and bases of science and technology, which form the core of a unique R&D hub responsible for the promotion of technological innovation through academic, corporate, and governmental cooperation and regional revitalization. Moreover, some of Japan's most comprehensive industrial infrastructure is located here, including Kansai International Airport, connecting the region to major cities around the world, and Hanshin Port, a strategically positioned international container port. As Kansai is located in the center of Japan's air, land, and sea transportation network, it is the perfect location for business, logistics, and R&D bases. Kansai is particularly proficient in the medical and biological fields, including pharmaceuticals, medical devices, advanced medicine, and health science. The region boasts a top share of the domestic pharmaceutical-related production shipment, along with both diversified and technologically advanced industries that support bio-industries, such as medical device development. Kansai is constantly producing world-class technical innovations and research results. The groundbreaking discovery of iPS cells was also made in Kansai. The Center for iPS Cell Research and Application, CIRA, takes maximum advantage of Kansai's strengths to promote the integration of all stages from basic research through to application for the realization of clinical trials for regenerative medicine and the development of drug development technologies under the direction of Professor Shinya Yamanaka, winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine 2012. Moreover, a variety of advanced IP.
So I have to stop it here. We don't have enough time. Hope you like them. We are always open to receive more visual inputs on cluster work in Asia. If there is something you would like to share with us, we will be very glad to disseminate it among the DCI members.
Thank you very much, John, for this visual touch of clusters. It's great always to travel to the places where clusters work and to see what it looks like, their environment. And yeah, we're eager to receive more visual material. So if you know of some other collaboration, clusters, videos, something like that, let us know and we will be very glad to share it among the TCI network and the Asian chapter. We are in the last hour of our conference day today, and although we love visual material, we like more the discussions, and we want to open up. And I ask you please to open also your cameras, all the members of the chapter, to share some time of talking together and see how we move forward in the TCI and MOC chapters, what kind of synergies we can find together, what kind of things we can collaborate, how TCI can support you, how we can bring in more people and that. So I welcome Ken, Tony, Merete. I have to introduce also Tsvelma Kiargas from Mongolia. Hello, Tsvelma. Hello, Moniritli, welcome. Engtul, very welcome. Rustam, you can also join if you want, and all others are also very welcome. Let's start this open discussion about the chapter. You know, it's a place where we want to create a community among the people and organizations that are working in clusters and innovation ecosystems with and see how to generate synergies and joint actions among them. Yeah. At the moment, the TCI chapter has representatives from Cambodia, Korea, Taiwan, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Japan, Thailand, and Indonesia, and we intend to broaden to more countries. So my first question and round question to you is how we can include newcomers more with an interest in the chapter, how we can open the club to newcomers. Who wants to start?
Can I start something?
Yes, sure, Ken. Go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. Firstly, can I say a huge thank you to our friends at TCI for co-hosting, because it's been we're only halfway through. We're not even halfway through yet because we have the rest of today and tomorrow as well. But what you've shown us this afternoon for me, or whatever time it is for people, that there's so many case studies, countries, people where we share common ground. And we are really so much looking at the same thing, both for academic case studies and for teaching, and to provide frameworks on the clusters and shared value and all these other competitiveness issues. And so really we're all working in the same arena. And I think that we can really do so much more by working together to share case studies, to adapt case studies for teaching, and to adapt frameworks that we are trying to develop to be useful to practitioners and businesses as well as academic side. And I've just learned so much this afternoon and so much through dealing with the TCI that I didn't know before, that I'm so pleased we've collaborated and you've really taken a lead in co-hosting. It's been really good, and I just say the more the better.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, there is always so much going on that I also learn a lot every time we open a new conversation. There is more and more coming on. So excellent. Yeah, Merete, you want to go on?
Yeah, I also just from my side want to, I also learned a lot from this. Here in Copenhagen, it's the morning session, but it was so nice to hear, and just want to really underline the messages coming from Patricia and Ken on let's keep on sharing, also sharing when things are perhaps not working as we expect them to do. So big kudos to both Tony from Taiwan and Rostam from Kazan in sharing when it's challenges with the SMEs, challenges with the policy side. I think this is where we can really learn from each other, and we can also push this agenda forward. It's great to see the nice cases. We always appreciate that. It's good also to encourage our policymakers to go into this area. They need to see what are clusters all about, how are they helping, how are they shifting agendas, how are they pushing a transition. But I think for TCI, for MOC Network, it's also great to focus a little bit on where the challenges are and where we can focus on that and learn from each other. So happy as always to share what we've been doing in the network, but also great that you could share where we can do a difference in Asia, being more specific on your challenges, on how can we tap into some of the policy agendas that you're facing, because I think for TCI we do have many public authorities as members, and trying to raise the cluster agenda is really trying to help a little bit also on the policy side. But great, thank you for all the speakers, everybody sharing both films, and keep on doing that, because it's great. I thought we were in Denmark, we were the only buckwheat producing country in the world, but now I know that Mongolia is very strong in buckseed as well. So that was also a learning thing for me.
Can I say something more?
Yes, sure.
Thanks very much indeed. So thanks to, I agree totally, Mara. It's really been an education to see the breadth and diversity of the activities that TCI are involved in, and from our point of view, the MOC and promoting Asian chapter as other chapters are in the world, Latin America and also European chapter in particular for MOC. And I just wanted to say that one thing that we are aiming to do is to build more local case studies from the MOC point of view. And that's not only from us, but we are taking a lead in that. And we have a couple of locally developed case studies tomorrow to show. And one thing that we would really value and that we're trying to do in the MOC network is to make the development of case studies more of a bottom-up approach, so that case studies can be developed locally and everybody can learn from the case studies and everybody can contribute to them. So what we're trying to do, we're doing this at CAMED Business School, is we're building some local case studies which we'd like to share. We're also working on a methodology. I know this because I'm head of the Curriculum Development Council in MOC, so I'm doing this. But we're building a methodology to help people build case studies, and anything that we can do to build and share case studies without putting enormous effort and constraints on people would be really welcome. So.
Thank you, Ken.
And we will share whatever we do. So, yeah.
Selma.
Yes. First of all, I very would like to thank Merit and Patricia to work with us, not only this year, the previous year, and maybe it's the real case for us we are really engaging the real time. That's the good chance for us to explain, to argue the cluster developments to the audience and public. And we believe that cluster models are very applicable and very reasonable for the new era of our world. It's the very reasonable, even in pandemic area. And the new normal is also the reasonable. What fact is driven us to the competitiveness and to clusters? It's at the moment that we don't know. But if we discuss, share ideas and discuss the challenges, maybe we can get the real solution. And our joint collaboration is also very helpful for cluster development and competitiveness all over the world. Thank you, all panelists and all attendees of the conference.
Thank you, Thelma. Tony, how are
Hey,
you?
actually, I have to say I really agree with Ken's proposal about the local case study, and I know I have to. I used to say that we can make an ebook. Yeah, I don't know if you still remember about that. And actually, I already mentioned that I'm doing the guidebook of digital transformation. I just find that doing the formal ebook is very costly and very time consuming. So I think when it comes to the local case, I think we are not necessary to publishing a formal ebook of the local case study, but we can different forms of publication to do that. Like it can be many articles in one website, or it could be just like a mini summary on a PDF summary. Things can things like that. But I think we can do some we can start to conduct a data set and start to accumulate this kind of local case study. And the second thing is because E3 is also is both MOC's member and the TCI member, and we can do more things. We can we got the R&D capability, and we got we also play a role like a think tank. So I think we can do much more, but I'm still thinking about that. But welcome any proposal. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, this is more brainstorming than really having a concrete thing to propose. Yeah, Casey is saying also, I also support the idea to produce local case studies and compilation of such case studies into an ebook. Excellent. And yeah, and Maurice also say they like the idea. Yeah, in TCI since we represent the practitioners and they don't have neither, I would say, the ability to prepare very long things and and also to present it as a case. I think this is a place where the MOC network can help us a lot, to promote this or bring together the practice with this methodology of writing cases, on making the questions that they have to answer, on writing it properly as a storytelling thing, and yeah, I think that could be really interesting. Now in TCI we are moving more into the guidebooks, playbooks, and shorter things that are more actionable perhaps for the practitioners, and also yeah, infographies and more visual things. I think that's also kind of inputs that the practitioners really like to see, and they can I think it's more easy to digest sometimes for them, but also cases are very interesting, and I think also for international visibility it's like proud to have, you know, something that you can show to others, and that has been a case of a study for a university or a faculty team. Great. This is great. Some other comments that you want to, yeah, Ken?
Can I just say, to follow on from that, the discussion on case studies, I think that there is demand for shorter, easier to prepare case studies. So we don't necessarily have to spend weeks and months preparing case studies. And I think that if we can just make case study development a framework that's relatively easily accessible to people, then you can put together a case study really based on 1 or 2 interviews. And maybe some of those case studies can be developed into larger case studies, but they don't all have to be. Because if we can make the process relatively straightforward, which we're trying to do, then everybody can be involved. And I think even with a standard template of the background to the market, the background to the economy, the industry, the issues that it's facing, and how the companies are dealing with this, whether it is digitalization or moving to more social integration or green development, as we're talking about. These case studies can be done. And I see that people are sharing things, and the more that we can share our frameworks, the better. And finally, on top of that, then, as well as case studies, we do need frameworks. We do need sort of a theoretical background or just a framework of understanding. And that's what we're trying to do in terms of shared value, which you'll see tomorrow. And I think that we can probably contribute something along those lines as well. So we're very willing to help build the case studies and help develop some of the frameworks if that's useful for people. So, and make it more accessible, that's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. One new area that we are developing and that my colleague John is in charge of is project development. We are trying to develop new projects within TCI. We are looking at international organizations like the World Bank, like the Asian Development Bank, or others that you may identify also. And well, I'm trying to see how we can work together also to bring more replicability of their projects that I know in some of your countries they are very active, but through a chapter like TCI, you know, through an Asian community of practitioners, they can have more impact, we think, and get advantage of learning from other places and look for cooperation opportunities again. And that, do you feel this is an area where we can also do something and you would be interested in participating?
I do, yes.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Yeah.
What kind of projects could be of your interest, or what kind of projects are you looking at with the cluster approach?
Any industry. So Sevelmar mentioned many. From Mongolia is kind of quite far ahead in terms of, I know Engtul and Sevelmar are quite far ahead in terms of cluster analysis, and it's something that they focus on. And they are, you know, and to look at the examples that we've had from Kazakhstan today, there is just so much scope. And I think that if we can have a framework, some kind of method to help with the cluster analysis that makes it accessible for people, then we will quickly find that many more people can become involved. I think it's a case of making the frameworks that we have accessible and doable, and then more industries and clusters can be much more easily involved. I think that would be my view, to make it accessible and understandable, so that then a whole wealth of clusters, networks and hubs can be able to contribute and benefit from it.
Yeah, we see in Europe there are many meta networks of clusters collaborating on in a specific industry, but also on this kind of challenges that we have been talking about today, you know, the green transition. So there are many clusters. This cross-cluster collaboration at international level is taking more and more relevance, I would say. Do you feel this is something that in Asia has potential to grow? Do you see this kind of meta networks? Yeah. Yes.
I do. Okay. And
okay.
I'm sure many other opinions will probably say the same thing.
Yeah. Tony, does the Taiwan clusters collaborate with other international clusters on a specific value chains and that?
Do you mean the green issue?
Yeah, for example, on clean tech, clean technologies, or I don't know, on health, on e-health, or something like that. That there can be synergies between a cluster in Taiwan, a cluster in Korea, and cluster in Japan, in different places. So like together they can do more, and maybe also approach more international markets, or approach new solutions, or things like that, you know, that cannot be solved with the cluster itself.
Yeah, I think so. To be honest, in the E3, we also have the Green Energy Center, and we try to do some innovation. To be honest, when it comes to the green energy industry, actually Taiwan has not so powerful. You mean? I mean, compared to the semiconductor, compared to the ICT.
Yeah.
So, but I think that there's still, you know, some topic we can discuss, and some some solution we can try to find out together. Yeah, I think it contains many potential.
Okay. Someone else wants to share? Here I see in the chat that someone from Croatia, Slavica, is offering also to contribute with a case on share value to the ebook. So this is taking shape now. We will get in touch. Yeah. Excellent.
And just adding to that, Patricia, I see Michael Enright is also with us now, and welcome, Michael.
Great.
Looking forward to your presentation tomorrow, and great that you also share the perspectives of the cluster-led policy work in Asia. I think let's see how ambitious we're getting with the ebook, but I think having some kind of reflection on the current status, I think it was extremely useful to get the very honest opinion and insights from Kazakhstan. So it could be great to some kind of what is the status of cluster-based policy work in Asia. So we can compare a bit and help a bit and guide a bit coming from the global perspective, because we also, as I mentioned in the chat, had some failures in Europe. So it's not like just one lean journey, but I think it's great that we can share a bit the perspective and understand it more in specific, where are the challenges also in applying this policy framework in Asia.
Michael, I have activated your microphone just in case you want to come in into the discussion.
First off, as I put in the chat, there have been a number of cluster programs, quite active in Asia that have more or less been islands, that have not really been integrated well into the sort of the global cluster networks, largely because they've been viewed as self-sufficient, and largely because they actually use a different set of tools. In that if you have a government that's already committed, then you work differently than if you're trying to organize, say, the private sector to be the interlocutor with government. Another thing that will come up, though, in looking in detail at clustering in Asia, and it's something that TCI and its own background and core membership has to deal with, and that is that several of these issues have to be dealt with in different ways at different stages of economic development. I mean, I was involved in an Asian Development Bank project in Heilongjiang, in 4 cities that only exist because coal is there. And the ADB was only willing to fund research and projects and support that would develop a non-coal economy, telling these 4 areas that they couldn't develop the coal economy from potentially, digging and burning coal to things like coal chemistry and clean coal, was basically telling them that people were going to die and that the work was going to be irrelevant to the local context, because you just couldn't get from here to there in one step, right? In Indonesia, do we want to worry solely about there should be no more cutting down of the forests? Or maybe should we say, well, if for whatever reason we can't stop them cutting down the forest, at least do we want them not to burn the forests and create, ecological disasters along the way? So again, remember that the core TCI membership, although there are developing country members, tends to look at first world problems from first world perspectives. And while certainly in places like Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, you have those first world issues and first world institutions, in many other places in Asia, you don't. And that's where there historically has been a bit of a disconnect between some of the things that TCI tends to focus on in Asia. In terms of frameworks to analyze clusters, I mean, we had developed a lot of that stuff back when TCI began, and there's a lot of stuff in the archives that I actually don't see people using actively today. And I can flag some of those things. One of the most useful things I found is that back in like the mid-1990s, end of the 1990s, I did a survey of well over 1,000 clusters worldwide. And what I was able to show is that there's not one type of cluster, and there's not an infinite number of types of clusters. That basically there are about 9 or 10 different types of clusters that you can isolate with a pretty quick survey of anybody who knows the cluster. And what that helps is that if you know you're in type 1 and you're not in type 8 or 9, then it points you to where the relevant case studies are, where the relevant tools are, right? So, an energy cluster in Kazakhstan or a bio cluster in Kansai, which are both things I've looked at, it's not useful for them to be sifting through things that are appropriate for a financial or professional services cluster in the core of a big city, or even in some cases, suburban, mid-tech type clusters. So there is a lot of that knowledge that exists. And I think maybe at that time, we didn't, through TCI and MOC didn't exist. We didn't actually have the delivery mechanism to get it out there. But I think there's a lot of stuff that was done previously that there's now the delivery mechanism to leverage. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel that we invented 20 plus years ago.
Thank you, Michael. I agree with you. I think the fact that TCI is here after 20-something years is that the cluster approach is clear, is working, and now each place has to work in their own recipe and their own strategies and looking at their inside capacities and build the best on that. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, and we all learn from it. Sure. So that's the great part. We all learn from it.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly.
Can I just say I agree with that very much, Michael, and good to meet you, by the way. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel at all, because so much has already been done, but perhaps make things more accessible to people and make it possible for more of our affiliates at every level to contribute something. And I think if we can do that, then there's an enormous pool of energy between us. And the network that TCI have and the network that we have at MOC, we can all contribute if it's really relatively simple to do so. And I think that's can bring the cluster and the network and the hub idea not reborn, but adapted to move forward on the good work that's already been done over many years, and bring it forward so that we can all contribute to it.
Yes, I think Merete, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I fully agree that there is really a huge amount of analysis, publications, many things done already. I think a bit of the challenge besides it, the challenge for how to disseminate this, I think it's a little bit what we also now try to do in TCI to make this more accessible also for practitioners, because they are busy people, they have a limited amount of time to take decisions. So this is also why we are putting in place this policy roadmap guide that is coming soon. And I think hopefully also this new ebook can try and have that in mind, the audience of practitioners taking political decisions and having very limited time to take those decisions. But it is amazing working in this area that there's so much in the library. Of course, it gets a bit also outdated. So that's one thing we need to bear in mind. Many things have happened over the years, and that's very nice. Putting the message forward and sharing it is, and I think besides that we lack the personal meetings, this online format is a really good way of sharing across the world and being very efficient. And so that's a very nice way of sharing in the community.
Absolutely. Janet, you are very silent today there behind the scenes. I want to thank you for providing us with this platform today and for doing all the behind the scene work. Thank you, Janet. And if you want to comment something also, please, you're welcome. I don't know what time is for you, Janet, in the US, also for Macaulay. No, it's very late, but thank you very much for being there. Let's make a round now. I think if you want to tell us about your next plans, what next work are you planning to have related to clusters? What's next in, let's say, in Mongolia, for example, Svelma, what's next for you with these clusters that you are helping to promote?
Actually, at the moment, we teach the cluster phenomena to the public officials and audiences and academic. And also we wanted to attract the academic people, also the practitioners, to well understand the cluster development concept and competitiveness. So at the moment, the political people is also the powerful, right, to select the development models. At the same time, we explain the cluster development. Of course, we don't sit there. We need to teach the cluster concept continuously. Of course, there is any opportunity to organize also the conference and webinars and also the other events to the ongoing audiences. It's always open. And at the moment I've been working for cluster concept more than a decade. Now the people can understand the cluster concept. And it's the mixed concept of the industrial development and cluster development. Sometimes people confuse what's the real meaning of the cluster? What's the development of the industry? Sometimes it's confusing, but first of all, we focus on the triple helix. And now we move in value into shared value. But there's included not only the private development, it's the collaborative actions. And we need to change the attitude of people in terms of the national competitiveness and national advantage in terms of the cluster development. So we really urgent need the ebook, which the explain the very simple understanding of the cluster development. In my understanding, the European cases also it's advanced. It's the advanced case. For the Asia, we are at the stage of the development, developing countries, and using the cluster phenomena. It's also the infant stage of the cluster concept. Decade, it's a long time, but in terms of the explain cluster concept, it's the short time. And what time is also needed for audiences to understand the cluster concept. Maybe I don't know about it, but we're still working on it.
Svelma, great to know. Now that you mentioned the training, we also have a conversation in the Latin American chapter where they are putting in place a training program for cluster managers. And we were also
it's very neat for the Asia. Yeah,
I'm going to share with you the program and how they are doing this in collaboration with Colombian University, that is member also of TCI, the Humboldt University, and also with Confecámaras, which is the National Association of Chamber of Commerce, that the Chamber of Commerce are acting as development agencies in the country in promoting clusters in each of the regions. And yeah, they had exactly the same need to make everybody understand about what clusters can bring, how clusters can be run more effectively, what resources are needed, how to organize that, how to organize by projects to work with SMEs and with companies. So it's exactly the same. And and they asked Merete and myself to give some feedback, and we also suggested that the policymakers should be included in the training, because this is not only one sector's opportunity. We all need to to be aligned in the cluster work. So yeah, I will share with you because it's very interesting, and I think also there is an option of cross fertilization between the both chapters. Yeah, Tony, do you want to share with us what is next for Taiwan on cluster, or after your guide, of course, that we are very much looking forward to?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, we are just thinking what we're gonna do when we run out of government's resource, or when the government try to stand back. Because you know, in my presentation, I always say, okay, we are going to help the Taiwanese government to do A, to do B, to do C, and it's quite normal in Asia country, because in Asia, the government always play a big role in every activity of economy. But I start to think, what if the government try to step back, or what if we run out of the public resource? And it's not possible for these SMEs to, organize their own cluster and try to fund themselves, or try to help each other. Because I know it's quite normal and common in Europe to see a cluster without government support. But in Asia, it's quite hard to see that. So I also support Michael's opinion, because it might be quite normal in the first world, but it's quite hard to see that in Asia, because without government support, what we gonna do? So I think maybe we can start to see a platform, or a cluster model, or kind of framework with a cluster without government support. What are we gonna do? And what kind of strategy we can use if we run out of public resource? Yep.
Thank you, Tony. Ken from Cambodia.
I think that we can also really make some good inroads into providing sort of examples and contribute that way, which we'd like to do. And so I think what's next is that looking at the competitiveness of countries such as Cambodia and countries within ASEAN region, then moving up the scale in terms of the value added and in terms of digitalization, which is being taken on quite well here, then there's going to be many good examples from around here. And I think that we can really do well by collaborating with other areas which are further ahead in terms of cluster promotion and coordination and learning from there, and also contributing lessons which are learned over here. We've already done, we've got a couple of small case studies tomorrow from our students, which will be quite interesting to hear about, and we'd like to make our contribution as well as learn. But I'm not prescribing anything. I just say we try to contribute whatever we can and learn from each other.
Excellent. Look at this comment from Derek Cummins, Ulster University in Northern Ireland. They are saying they also have just run a cluster leadership program in Northern Ireland. So yeah, sometimes we think the Europeans are more advanced. We are all the same place, I think. and sometimes if we don't have, we would like to have more. So yeah, that's it. And we will share it, by the way, the things that you can share with us. Daryl, very welcome. And we will show you, there has been expertise also from TCI in this training, and with E4, if I remember well, and with other practitioners from TCI. So it's always great to see the networks is present in so many places. Yeah. Thank you all. We are 5 minutes to conclude the conference. This was really a nice conversation. Let's move on all this that we discussed. We have plenty of room for collaboration and to do more. And I'm very welcome also if anybody wants to join the chapter, the MOC network also in Asia. This is an open club, and always happy to welcome new ones. Together we are better. So thank you very much all. And I give the word to Merete for some final closing words. And I see you tomorrow in this in the MOC day with all these very interesting cases, studies, the students also, the young generations coming up and showing us their work. It will be a very interesting day with Michael also Enright, with Sodel Lee, many things. Don't miss it. See you there. Merete, the floor is yours. Bye.
Thank you, Patricia. And also congratulations to you, Patricia, for again, great moderation and keeping up the good spirit. So that was very nice. Yeah, and from my side, this was also very enjoyable and a learning experience. And I think this is exactly what TCI is about. And this has been super great to organize this together with the MOC network on sharing the challenges. Of course, our world is different. Our locations are different. But in the end, we do face many of the same challenges. And I think just the last discussion we had during the last half hour really underlined the topics of, policy challenges, learning across clusters, how to build the right programs. And here we do have common areas of collaboration and of interest. We can really learn and share from each other. So I think it was a very nice day. I'm traveling tomorrow, so I'll be joining from a phone, but I'm really also looking forward to hearing both the bigger perspective on competitiveness, but also again from the case studies. I think there's a lot of value in studying that closer. I'm very much looking forward to our joint work on the ebook. So let's continue our discussions on that, how we can both make this useful, but also urgent, and put it to market as soon as possible. So thank you so much for everybody joining, and have a great second day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
you. Bayarilla. Bayarilla. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Grazie.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.